Klung here. Artra monologues. That's I talk, you listen, or not. It's not a conversation. It's not a discussion. It's not a debate. It's me making noise with my mouth. That noise called words. Putting them together in a row, like a sentence, and putting sentences together into paragraphs, etc., etc., etc. So, monologue. That means you don't get to talk back while I'm talking. If you want to talk, you're listening to this on your telephone, your pad, or your notebook, or PC, or whatever, or just in your imagination. You can talk, but I can't hear you. How about that? All right. Now, that's not to say that I can't hear you at certain times. For example, I'm going to do a live radio chat with some listeners at some point. At that point, when I actually decide that I actually want to hear what you have to say, and I don't mean particularly you, but perhaps particularly somebody of interest. So, like I might do an interview with a public official, a politician, a government agent, a judge, a prosecutor, a police chief, a regular, along the beat kind of police officer. Bear in mind, I will not use the phrase law enforcement. That's a Taliban phrase. That's the phrase the Nazis used to describe the Gestapo. And in a free country, we don't have people that are appointed or hired, to walk around enforcing the law. It's not the way a free country works, people. Get this shit out of your head and get it right. All right. Monologue. That's what I do. And you can listen or not. If you want to talk, go right ahead. Because I can't hear you. And if I wanted to hear you, I would say, hey, call into the radio station here, and I'll put you on the air and we'll have a conversation. Not likely to have a debate, but, might entertain that idea if you've got something important to say. And when I say important, I mean something logical and sane and rational and perhaps helpful. I might consider a little comedy, a little sense of humor is cool. All right, so if you want to call in, we can do the comedy routine. I can tell jokes and you can laugh on the air. Like an audience of one. I've got a laugh track, by the way. I don't even need people in the audience, you folks, to laugh out loud, LOL, because I've got a laugh track. I can just hit the button and it goes, ah! Giggle, giggle, and yay, and so forth. All right, so what we have here is a clear understanding. Now, don't we? Yes, we do. I hope we do. Monologue. I talk, you listen, or not. I mean, if it was a debate or a dialogue, or dialogue meaning other people besides me, a diverse participation in the conversation. Diverse. Dialogue. Diverse. Those two words are related. All right. So, a note about my recent post on Facebook, which got listed in the trending thingies, which is pretty cool. I posted, there was an interview with Elizabeth Smart. I'm sure you're familiar with her at this point. I posted the interview. It's a short little interview, and she's talking about pornography and how that had played a part in her ordeal. And I made a comment as an introduction to that, which I'm assuming people would read before they watched the video and interview. And I assumed, apparently I was wrong, but I assumed that people would understand what I said in the intro and understand, English. Apparently not. Well, some did, I think, perhaps. I got pretty good response from posting that on Facebook. More response than I've ever gotten before from a post, which is pretty awesome, really. Unfortunately, I got some wackos that wanted to make some comments, and they did. And one young lady, Megan, got quite downright annoying and abusive and scary. I had to block her in the end because she was just being totally fucking annoying and obnoxious. Wouldn't listen to reason. Wouldn't even try to be reasonable. Just totally obnoxious. And I feel sorry for her and her family. I believe she has been a victim, something like Elizabeth Smart was a victim. She was a victim of being mind raped, and I'm guessing for a lot longer than Elizabeth was raped, physically, sexually. I'm guessing Megan was mind raped since the day she was born, because obviously she is suffering from traumatic life syndrome. She's been brainwashed, indoctrinated, manipulated, conditioned. She has been duped, and she's allowed herself to be duped. And, to be honest with you, I think most people, just keep this within America here. I know American better than I know Chinese, Japanese, Tibetans, and Swedish people. So I can address Americans in America with some confidence, as opposed to just, I have no idea what the Swedish people do for entertainment, I'm just not familiar with Swedish society and the Swedish people. Don't know, and I really can't talk as an educated person about Swedish people. But anyway, she's been duped. In other words, she's allowed herself to she's allowed her head to be filled with nonsense and bullshit. And she's allowed her brain to be contaminated with absolute total crap. And I say this with some confidence because I'm an observer of human nature, human behavior, and they pretty much, well, let me put it this way. When you think that what I said in the introduction to my piece on Elizabeth Smart, if you think what I said there was, shall we, something other than what I said, then it seems rather obvious to me, and it should be obvious to any educated person, any literate person, that Megan simply didn't understand English. She didn't understand what I said. Apparently. Because if she had understood what I said, perhaps she would have said something like, well, and if she hadn't been, indoctrinated and contaminated with all kind of bullshit from the mind benders and the word twisters. Those are legitimate words, by the way. They mean what they mean. And these mind benders and word twisters, thought manipulators, social engineers in America have turned the English language into babble. And most people have been babbleized. And most people speak, write, and read babblish. So when you say something in English, proper English, correct English, they hear babblish because that's the way their brain has been conditioned to think. I feel bad for them. I think they are, poor victims. I used the word poor victim in the Elizabeth Smart thing. And apparently people misunderstood that. I know what the word poor means. I know what the word victim means. And I meant poor victim in a sympathetic, compassionate way. She was the poor victim. I don't mean that in any condescending way, and I certainly didn't expect anybody to take it that way. But apparently they did. Quite a few people did. And I'm flabbergasted that they were consistent with previously diagnosed conditions. Babbleized. And that's unfortunate. Can't do anything about that. I can't. I'm, just one guy. And I could certainly appeal to, common sense. I could appeal to whatever basic intellectual capacities you have and suggest maybe you might want to, wash your brain. That's sort of like the contradiction of brainwashing. I think brainwashing is kind of a interesting word. They don't wash your brain. They get your brain all dirty with bullshit and stupid ideas. So I think brainwashing is an interesting idea. Unless, of course, they actually just wash your brain of all intellect and just put in it. There should be more words to that. It's like brainwashing and indoctrination go hand in hand. First, you wash the brain of all intellectual capacity to think logically and rationally, like your brain was intended to think. And then they put, instill, contaminate your brain with bullshit. And babblish. If you're an English-speaking person, you're not speaking English, people. Most people in America don't speak English anymore. They don't speak it. They don't understand it. They certainly don't comprehend it. What it is what they're doing is they're speaking and reading and hearing and thinking in babblish, which is a word you might want to look up. Babblish. Well, look up babble, the root word, and that'll tell you what most Americans are doing when it comes to the English language. Babble. And I would think that most people would be really confused. And from what I've heard and what I've read, what with the comments that people, particularly on this Elizabeth Smart page that I posted here, particularly on that thread on Facebook, people apparently are totally contaminated with this babblish, commonly called English, but it isn't English anymore. It's just babblish. Just my observation. Please don't accuse me of having an opinion here. It's a critical analytic observation. And I make use of the other thing called calculated logical conclusion. Those are English words. May have had their roots in other languages, but, you know, they're English. They're in the English dictionary. They mean what they mean. If you don't get it, then look it up in a fucking dictionary. What the hell you think dictionaries are for? You don't have to guess at it. You don't have to speculate. I mean, you know, just look it up. It'll tell you what the word means. And you can pick the meaning, if there's more than one meaning. You can pick the one that's appropriate for, you know, the sentence that I used and to say something. Logical. I know people get things confused and they think logic is something, by your logic, you know, like the logic that you own, which is not logical at all. It's totally stupid. And people just like, you own logic. And no, I don't. Logic is logic. It's like not possible to own logic. It's a process of thinking. And it's a correct one. There are like false logic and faulty logic and flawed logic, and those are not logical by the very nature of it. If the logic is wrong, it's not really logic. It's, I call it, I think logically by thinking illogically. So, more babblish. It's like, my illogical concept, my illogical thought is logical. Simply because the word logic is in there somewhere. I said logic, but I just said illogic in front of it. I just said illogic or illogical, and, you know, since the word logic is in there, then it must be logical. What? Crap. Give me a break. So it's like, you poor Americans. And I don't mean you don't have any money. I mean you poor, unfortunate people that you've allowed yourself to be stupefied by the mind benders and the thought twisters and the word babblers, and Jesus Christ, it just boggles the mind. All right, gonna take a short break. Be right back. All right, I'm back. So, what I'm saying is, on the Elizabeth Smart thread that I started, that I introduced with words, English, and I said what I meant. What I meant was that I didn't really expect the thread to take off, and that I would get all kinds of comments from all kinds of people. I should have expected the comments to be along certain lines, pretty much the usual amount of babblish and misunderstanding, confusion on the parts of people making rather dumb comments. And I hate to say this, but the majority of the comments were just fucking stupid. I hate to be hard on you guys. I hate to come down on you like this, but you asked for it. You said something like totally stupid, and I'm calling it out. You said something stupid, people. You did. Now there's a few, and I'm guessing 2 or 3, maybe 4, pretty much, tops, out of the dozens of people who commented. That actually showed some sense, that actually was using their brain. I might add, the way the brain was meant to be used, intellectually, logically. And a lot of people just weren't thinking. I'm afraid they were just emoting emotions and hysteria and total misunderstanding of the issue that I was talking about when I began the thread. I admit that I probably could have used another word besides poor victim, because I might have added that poor victim of such horrible abuse by this insane maniac that abducted her. I could have, but I didn't. But I just assumed that people would understand, English. I failed to use the proper word there. Instead of poor victim, I could have simply said that poor unfortunate victim. I left the word out. And if someone had pointed this out to me early on in the thread, I would have made the adjustment, at least attempted to. Made the correction. Put forth some sort of disclaimer. I didn't mean that I was being, sarcastic or condescending or unsympathetic to her and her horrendous experience, because I wasn't. I didn't intend that. That wasn't my purpose in even posting the comments, the thread, the video. I was simply saying, and I'll say it now, and I've said it on the thread. Apparently a little too late, because people have already been ranting for 3 or 4 days now about that. Not just that, but they've totally gone off on tangents that have nothing whatsoever to do with the post that I put up and started. Nothing to do whatsoever with my comments. They just kind of make up shit along the way and just argue and bicker with each other. And it's kind of fascinating to watch. Behavioral science studies. It's one of my fields of expertise. But poor unfortunate victim of a lunatic, raving mad lunatic. Unfortunately, there's a lot of raving mad lunatics making comments on that thread, and it's a bit scary to read the comments and see that people are like, totally, I don't know what you're saying, I don't understand it. It's like babble. Because, basically it is babble. And they're just being hysterical and irrational, illogical. And that's not really proper thinking. Yeah. If you can't use logic to think, then, you're just rolling along in shit. I think you'd be kind of concerned about that. I think you'd be ashamed of it. Like, oh, I just said a bunch of babblish that doesn't mean shit, and and I'm totally wrong about whatever it is I'm saying, and I totally misunderstood whatever the guy said in English. I'm sorry, in English, and I'm like really an idiot, and I think they'd be embarrassed by their illiteracy and their inability to read and understand and comprehend, English when it's properly used. And I do speak proper English. I'm not talking about the Brits here. I'm talking about the language, I suppose you could call it Americanese. God, I don't want to insult the English language by calling it Americanese, because that's like saying, Japanese is like totally not a language. All right. Okay. So, what else can I say? Oh, I can say a lot. All right. Another break. I'll be back. All right, I'm back. The thing is about this Elizabeth Smart situation. I said in the intro that the man that abducted her and treated her badly. Okay, I'm not afraid to say the word. He raped her a lot during that 9-month captivity of her victimization. And I'll say this on the side, I hope that Elizabeth recovers adequately to be able to live a normal life, whatever would be normal for her, and find some measure of peace and happiness in life. I have absolute, total compassion for her situation at that time, then, in the past. And I certainly hope that she does recover well enough to be able to function as a normal human being. And I use the word normal, generally speaking, not overall, because her idea of what is happiness may be different than what is happiness for me or you. Everybody is an individual, and they're an individual first. So, having said that, and that's perfectly clear in my intro, I believe I've read it over, and it says exactly what I meant. And absolutely no ill will or malice towards Elizabeth Smart in regards to her ordeal, not one iota of heartless insensitivity on my part in regards to Elizabeth Smart's experiences during that 9-month period and her attempts at recovery afterwards. And after all, it has been 14 years since that time occurred. 14 years is a long time, but sometimes it takes 14 years or more to recover from a bad experience. Trauma does imprint on your brain and causes a person to be unhappy and so forth. So I wish her well. I hope her all the best of luck in surviving and recuperating and recovering and going on with life as she would have it be. However, what I mentioned, and the whole point of my introducing that video interview to my Facebook people, is to suggest that, one, the man that did that to her, the man who raped her and so on, is criminally insane. And he does not belong in prison of any kind with normal criminals. And I use the word normal, meaning, not insane people. And I made that clear. It was English. I don't see how anybody could misunderstand that. I said, I think, pretty clearly, the man is insane. The man is criminally insane. And he doesn't belong in the general population of a prison with, sane criminals. It's cruel and unusual punishment, and the Constitution is clear on that. You can't impose cruel and unusual punishment on a person. And since the man is obviously mentally ill, totally wacko, crazy fucker, I mean, just being himself without abducting anybody, he's insane. So you add the fact that he abducted Elizabeth Smart and took her out in the freaking woods or whatever and did rapey things to her, among other things. He's insane. It's obvious. There's no question here. So we need to treat him humanely by, one, protecting society and other people, other human beings besides Elizabeth Smart, from his insanity. If he'd have just lived in the woods with his wife, now there's an interesting situation. I don't get that at all. What kind of woman? She must have been just as insane as he is. I'm thinking. Nobody mentions her much. Which is unfortunate because there's an interesting dynamic there. There's a crazy man, quote unquote, married to another lunatic. But you'd have to be crazy to go along with him. And I don't think this is a case of Charlie Manson hypnotizing people or whatever. I think, they were together and they're both crazy. It's that simple. And she should be in a mental institution as well. For the criminally insane. And perhaps maybe the two of them could get some sort of treatment for their mental illness. At least keep them away from normal society. So that was the point. One of the points in my intro, and I made that point very clearly. Just no doubt. I've read it over again, and it says exactly what I meant to say. Nothing wrong with what I said. In fact, I'm absolutely right. It's not just my opinion. It's, shall we call it, a professional diagnosis which stands apparently alone, because not too many people got that. And perhaps a lot of people just simply are insane when they misunderstand the English that I write. I think it's just crazy that people don't get it. I mean, I said it very clearly. English, in English, didn't say it in Babel. I'm back. So as far as my intro to that piece on Facebook, the thread, which I started, by the way, and has my name at the top, meaning, it's mine, I'm responsible for it, I started it. And there are other threads started by other people and organizations about the Elizabeth Smart story, this particular story, part of it, including NBC. And on Facebook, they have a thing called Trending, and they post, they put up posts that are popular or getting a lot of attention. And guess what? Mine was number 6 on the list. Trending poll of the top 10 or whatever, trending or most popular posts on internet, on Facebook. I'm like 3 below NBC's popularity, which got a lot more responses than I did. I think I don't know what it is today, but when I checked it yesterday or the day before, it was like NBC had 12 million views or something. 12 million. I don't know. There was a 12 in that somewhere. They had 12,000 maybe views. I don't know. A lot. As opposed to my merely like 150 views or comments. So, between NBC and me, hey, I'm right up there. And it's unfortunate that the people that saw my post in my introduction to the interview with Elizabeth Smart about the subject she was talking about, unfortunate that people didn't get it, what I said, and didn't understand it. I blame that on illiteracy, and American people are overwhelmingly the most illiterate people on the planet, and that's an indictment against them, and it's sad. It's disturbing because if you're illiterate, you're pretty much lost. And I'm guessing that the Mindbenders, the Socialist Collective Alliance, Socialist Neocon Collective Alliance, is loving it when they're looking at people making these comments and saying, we win, we've totally brainwashed and freaking dumbified every human being in the country. We can now control them like sheep or pieces of wood on a game board. I hate it when the mindbenders and the bullies and tyrants and manipulators and conditioners of society, the elitists, actually succeed in dumbifying and stupefying Americans. It's pathetic. And Americans are pathetic overall. Many of them, I'm guessing more than 50% from what I've seen. I mean, when you look at the thread and you see the comments and you see there's like lots and lots of comments and different people, a lot of different people, quite a few different people anyway. And, most of the comments are just stupid shit. Like totally not related to what I said. They just went off on some tangent about there's one guy there just posting stuff about Mormons and the Mormon church. And I'm like, I don't get what the hell's that got to do with it? Nothing. I don't think anything. I mean, he could be. I mean, expressing his opinion. That's fine. But it doesn't relate to what I said. I mean, what does the Mormon religion have to do with, any criminally insane person being put in the general population of a freaking prison with normal people? Oh, I'm not saying all the prisoners in the prisons are normal. Some of them are criminally insane too. And then there's a lot of poor victims. And when I say poor victims in this case, they are in fact poor, which is probably why they wound up in prison instead of getting probation or whatever. Because rich people get a break. It's just common knowledge in America. If you're rich, you got money, you're connected, you get away with murder. Oh, reminds me, Hillary Clinton, for example. Won't get into that one. You know what I think about that cunt. So anyway, Megan comes on and she's saying stuff. And then she makes it personal and she starts like stalking me on the page, not physically, she's not outside my door. Though, if she lived anywhere near me, I imagine she would be somewhere in the neighborhood. Probably out in my front yard on the street yelling obscenities at me or something. That's the kind of person she is, I think. She's insane. Mentally ill, needs help. I hope that she gets it. I doubt that she will. I'm sure that her friends will sympathize with her and probably support her and defend her and do absolutely nothing to help her get better. I mean, she's not well in the head. And so anyway, I had to block her because I tried in various ways to get her to just shut up and go away for her own good, for if nothing else, because she's just being crazy. I'm not saying she belongs in a prison or a mental institution. I'm just saying she needs help, honestly. I believe that. With all of my learned psychological knowledge and experience with the human condition. Anyway, I had to blank her because she wouldn't go away and she wouldn't shut up. And she should have shut up because it was my thread. I owned it, my name at the top. And she kept saying things like, it's not your thread, it's not your thread. Yeah, my name on the top. That means it's mine. I mean, come on. Duh. So, it's just, like I said, boggles the mind. But anyway, she had to go because she crossed the line. She became acting like a raving lunatic. She said nasty things. She called me names and stuff. And she just refused to acknowledge the fact that she was being a pain in the ass. And I, of course, did act like a prick towards her at some point, and I was obnoxious. And perhaps I shouldn't be proud of that, but I wasn't about to participate in that, engage in that relationship with her by trying to be rational and logical and explain to her why she was wrong and why she was being obnoxious and all that stuff. It would have been pointless. People like that don't get it. And you can, write a frickin' book on what's wrong with that and why she shouldn't be like that and try to prove to her that her logic or thinking is not logical and not rational. But it wouldn't do any good because she's not capable. She is not reason able. And I'm just talking about her in particular here, but the general rule applies to a lot of people. Most people are not reason able. That's able with a capital A. And it's sad. But, it's pointless to, as a friend of mine once said, it's pointless to argue with idiots. And that's true, because you are not going to change their mind. You're not going to convince them that they're wrong. You're not going to cause them to start thinking rationally and logically. If they were capable of thinking logically, they would have been doing so from the day they were born, I'm guessing, at least by the time they got to the point where they could actually communicate with other people in English. They would be rational and logical and say things in English and understand English. I mean, any 12-year-old can understand what I write and say. Any 12-year-old should be able to understand basic English. If they live in America, it's the language of their mother tongue, so to speak. If you can't understand English and you've been in this country 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more, and you've been speaking English since, you were a child, an infant, whenever, when you learn to talk, you learn, I'm going to talk, babble. Well, it's gibberish when you're a baby, ga, goo, ga, ga, type of thing. And, that's reinforced by parents going, goo, goo, ga, 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 to their kid. And that's when the kid's saying, well, I must be saying something important and they must be understanding me because they're saying the same thing, googly, googly, ga, 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 right back at me. That's probably not the best way to raise a child. All right. I will continue this on another episode, maybe the next one. And I covered the intro and what I said and what I meant, and it says exactly what I meant, except for the poor thing. I should have put poor, unfortunate victim. Sins of omission. I didn't say that word in there, and people misunderstood what I said. So I should have been a little clearer, I suppose. But there's no reason for everybody to go hysterical over it. Just think about it. Particularly when I explained it later on, at some point I explained. I didn't mean it that way. You took it the wrong way because you're illiterate. You can't, imagine that the word, unfortunate is in there between poor and victim. I know it should be there. My fault that it's not there. My bad. I admit that. But come on, people. You don't have to be like raving lunatics because I left the word out. And besides, I put the word in just now and other times on the thread. I said, I didn't mean it the way you thought it meant that, because it's not. And you're being an idiot for ignoring my correction, as it were. So stop it. All right. I'll be talking to you again here shortly. Do whatever it is you do and be happy. I'll see you in a bit.